My sister called me a parasite in front of my entire family. She thought it was a label that would stick to me forever. She didn't realize it was a trigger. For years, she had defined my worth by what I lacked financially. Tonight, standing in the wreckage of my own dignity, I decided she would finally learn my true worth of value measured not in dollars, but in the silent, world-changing work I did in secret. Stay with me, because this isn't just a story about revenge. This is a story about how to build a life of undeniable worth when the world, and even your own family, tries to tell you that you have none. If you've ever felt invisible, or had your worth questioned by the very people who are supposed to lift you up, leave a broken heart emoji in the comments so I know I'm not alone in this. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you will know the exact 3 steps to take that pain and forge it into power. That word, parasite, wasn't born in that moment on the lawn. It was forged over years of quiet resentment and loud displays of charity. It started the day our mother, Eleanor, got the diagnosis, a degenerative neurological condition, the kind that doesn't get better, it only gets managed, the kind that slowly steals the person you love, piece by piece, right in front of you. That diagnosis split our lives into 2 different timelines. Lila, already a rising star in Charlotte real estate, chose the path of the benefactor. Her help arrived in crisp envelopes with the bank's logo, in catered meals from expensive restaurants, in a new adjustable bed she made sure everyone knew the price of. Her love was a press release. Every act of generosity was announced, photographed, and posted. She wasn't caring for a person. She was funding a project, and she was its star executive. To the outside world, she was the devoted daughter holding everything together. I chose a different path. I traded a promising postdoc position at a research institute in Zurich for my childhood bedroom. I traded the clean, sterile scent of a state-of-the-art laboratory for the medicinal smell of pill bottles and antiseptic wipes. My life became a calendar of doctor's appointments, physical therapy sessions, and medication schedules. My contribution wasn't written on a check. It was written in the sleepless nights spent by my mother's side when she was in pain, in the hours I spent translating complex medical jargon for her, in the simple act of holding her hand and telling her she wasn't alone. Lila saw my sacrifice as a failure. She couldn't comprehend a value that didn't have a dollar sign attached to it. I remember one Thanksgiving, a couple of years ago. The whole extended family was there. The air was thick with the scent of roasted turkey and my aunt's too sweet pecan pie. My uncle turned to me and asked, "So, Eris, still working on those little science projects of yours before I could even explain the progress I was making on my cellular regeneration models?" Lila let out a sharp, dismissive laugh from across the table. "Oh, Eris is still playing with her little cells," she said, waving her hand as if shooing a fly. "It's cute. A nice little hobby to keep her busy." She then picked up her wine glass, gesturing to the lavish spread on the table. Meanwhile, some of us have to work in the real world. I mean, who do you think paid for this entire dinner? The table went quiet. I felt my work, my passion, my entire intellectual existence shrink into something frivolous and childish. I was the family charity case, and she was the patron saint. That was the narrative she was building, one expensive gift and one public put-down at a time. And the stakes were terrifyingly clear. If I let her continue, her version of the story would become the official family history. I wouldn't just be the daughter who came home, I'd be the daughter who did nothing else, who contributed nothing, a parasite. And the truth of what I was actually doing in the quiet of my room, on the screen of my laptop, would be erased forever. So I have to ask you, which do you think is a more valuable way to care for someone with your money or with your time? Let me know in the poll. My life became a collection of quiet, unseen moments. It was the low, rhythmic beep of the blood pressure cuff at 3 a.m., a sound that became the soundtrack to my nights. It was the bluish glow of my laptop screen casting long shadows on the wall, the only light in the house still on after midnight. It was the bitter, stale taste of coffee from a pot that had been sitting for hours. My only fuel as I cross-referenced medical journals with my mother's latest test results. Lila saw me in a spare bedroom, wasting my life. The world saw a daughter who had moved home. But in those quiet hours, I was a scientist on the brink of a discovery and a warrior fighting a war on two fronts. One front was my mother's illness. I became more than her daughter. I was her advocate, her translator, her personal researcher. I remember one call with a new specialist, a man with a dismissive tone and a pre-written prescription pad. He was recommending a new drug with a litany of side effects. I listened patiently, then calmly began to question him about its mechanism of action, citing 2 recent studies from a German research group that suggested an alternative with fewer neurological risks. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. The doctor's tone changed. Who am I speaking with again?" he asked, suddenly respectful. "I'm her daughter," I said simply. In that small victory, I found a flicker of my old self. The other front was the one I fought in secret. A few months after I moved home, an email landed in my inbox that felt like a lifeline from another universe. It was a formal offer for a fully funded fellowship at a cutting-edge biotech firm in Geneva. The salary was staggering. The research was groundbreaking. It was everything I had ever worked for. For an entire afternoon, I just stared at it, letting myself dream. I imagined the clean mountain air, the hum of a world-class lab, the feeling of being respected as a peer, not pitied as a caregiver. I saw a version of my life where I was just Eris, the scientist. Then I heard my mother call my name from the other room, her voice thin and frail. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and typed out 2 words, "I'm coming." A few minutes later, I sent a reply to Geneva. With a heavy heart, I respectfully declined their offer. That night, I cried myself to sleep, mourning the life I had just let go. But my work didn't stop. It evolved. The research I had started in Zurich was purely theoretical. But now, watching my mother's daily struggle, it became intensely personal. Every night, after she was asleep, I'd open my laptop. The screen wasn't filled with social media or online shopping, as Lila probably imagined. It was filled with complex molecular models, protein folding simulations, and reams of genetic data. I wasn't just playing with cells anymore. I was hunting for a key, a way to promote neural repair at the cellular level. I poured every ounce of my frustration, my grief, and my intellect into that screen. My small bedroom didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a command center. It all culminated in a video call one Tuesday night, just a week before the party. I waited until the house was completely silent, then locked my bedroom door and put on my noise-canceling headphones. The screen flickered to life, showing 2 people in sharp business suits, seated in a minimalist office with a sweeping view of a lake behind them. The location tag on the bottom of their screen read, Geneva, Switzerland. Dr. Vance. The man, Mr. Dubois, said, his voice crisp. "Good evening. The consortium has reviewed your final proposal. They are prepared to meet your terms regarding the intellectual property clauses." I kept my voice steady, my heart pounding, and the asset transfer protocol. It needs to be executed precisely as we discussed. Discretion is paramount. The woman, Ms. Chen, nodded. Of course. The holding corporation is established and insulated. Once we receive your final electronic signature, the transfer will be initiated. The funds will be staggering. She paused, looking at me intently through the screen. We just need to confirm one last time. Are you absolutely certain about the designated primary beneficiary for the foundation you're endowing? I thought of my mother sleeping down the hall. I thought of Lila's sneering comments. I thought of the word parasite. A cold, hard resolve settled over me. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, I said. And so, a week later, I found myself standing on that lawn, the secret of that Geneva call coiled inside me like a charged wire. The party, ostensibly a celebration of my mother's stable health, was in full swing. To everyone else, it must have looked perfect. White tents, tasteful floral arrangements, a string quartet playing softly near the rose bushes. But I could see the cracks in the facade because I knew who had paid for them. Lila made sure of it. She drifted through the crowd, a glass of champagne in her hand, her voice carrying just enough for everyone to hear her little remarks. When she saw me, her eyes did a slow, deliberate scan of my simple linen dress. "Oh, Eris, honey," she said, her voice dripping with pity. "Is that what you're wearing? It's quaint. I told you, you could have borrowed anything from my closet." I just smiled. "I'm comfortable. Lila, thanks." My dress was a simple, clean choice. It wasn't a cry for financial help. Later, I overheard her talking to our cousins. Of course, I was happy to organize and pay for all of this, she said, gesturing expansively at the scene. "Nothing is too expensive when it comes to Mom's health. It's the least I can do, really, since I'm the only one in a position to handle these things." The implication was clear. A carefully aimed dart meant for me. She was the provider. I was the burden. I tried to ignore it. I focused on my mother, who was sitting in a comfortable chair in the shade, looking happier than I'd seen her in months. I brought her a glass of lemonade, adjusted the shawl around her shoulders, and we talked about her garden. For a few minutes, I could almost forget the web Lila was spinning. I could almost believe this was just a normal family party. But then, Lila tapped a spoon against her glass, calling for everyone's attention. The chatter died down. The quartet softened to a barely there hum. This was her moment. "I'd just like to say a few words," she began, beaming at the crowd. "Seeing everyone here today to celebrate Mom's strength and resilience, it means the world." She paused, her eyes finding our mother, to Mom, whose courage inspires us all. People smiled and murmured their agreement, but Lila wasn't finished. She turned her body slightly, playing to the audience. And I have to say, I'm just so grateful and so proud to be in a position where I can give her this beautiful day, to provide for her, to make sure she has everything she could ever need or want, and to lift that burden off everyone else. And that's when the world tilted on its axis. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about showing off. I saw it with horrifying clarity to Lila. Our mother's illness wasn't a tragedy. It was a stage. It was a prop she used to perform her favorite role, Lila the Magnanimous, Lila the Savior. My mother's pain was her spotlight. My sacrifice was the dark background that made her shine all the brighter. As the polite applause for her speech faded, I stood frozen. My own small, simple gift for my mother, a framed picture of the three of us from a happier time, feeling heavy and pathetic in my hands. Lila glided over to me, her eyes lit with the thrill of her performance. She glanced at the wrapped frame in my hands. A look of pure contempt flashed across her face. Still with the sentimental little trinkets, she sneered. Her voice a low hiss meant only for me, but loud enough for those nearby to catch. God, Eris, for once in your life, can't you stop being such a parasite and contribute something real? That was the word, the one that detonated the silence. I felt the heat on my cheeks, the stares of our relatives. I thought I would shatter. I thought I would scream, or cry, or run. Instead, a wave of pure, cold focus washed over me. The buzzing in my ears stopped. The frantic hammering in my chest slowed to a steady, powerful rhythm. I lifted my eyes from the ground and looked directly at her. She was still smiling, waiting for me to break. But I wouldn't. The girl who cried at Thanksgiving was gone. The daughter who mourned a lost career was gone. In her place was a scientist who had just isolated a variable and a strategist who had just seen the entire board. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her, my expression calm, almost serene. And in the chilling quiet of my own mind, I made a promise. The show is over. Lila, your show ends right here. What Lila saw in that moment was a silent, wounded girl, finally broken by public shame. What she couldn't see were the months of meticulous planning, the sleepless nights spent not just at my mother's bedside, but at the chessboard of my own life, carefully arranging the pieces for this exact endgame. This wasn't a spontaneous reaction. It was a strategy, and it had been executed in 3 distinct phases. Phase 1 was simple, trace and record. For the past year, my sister's generosity had come with a constant barrage of text messages, each one a little paper cut to my soul. I used to delete them instantly to get their venom out of my sight. But then I realized they weren't just insults, they were evidence. I started saving everything. Scrolling back through my phone felt like reading the diary of my own devaluation. There was the text from last Christmas, just wired another 10K out to Mom's account to cover her expenses for the next few months. Don't worry your little head about it. I've got it handled. Just focus on being there. The generosity was a performance. The condescension was the point. Then the one from May. After a particularly difficult doctor's appointment, heard Mom had a rough day. Are you sure you're keeping up with her medication schedule? I know it's hard for you to focus on details. It's a good thing my commissions can cover a full-time nurse if you get too overwhelmed. It was a master class in concern trolling, framing my hands-on care as incompetent and her money as the only real solution. These weren't just hurtful messages. They were data points. A clear, documented pattern of financial control and emotional manipulation. A story told in blue and gray bubbles. I saved every single one. They were the foundation of the truth. Phase 2 was about leverage. Lila thought my skills were useless in the real world. She was wrong. She just didn't understand the world I command. 2 months ago, I scheduled a video conference. Not with lawyers this time, but with the administrative board of North Charlotte General, the hospital that managed my mother's care. When I appeared on the screen from my childhood bedroom, I could see the polite skepticism on their faces. They were expecting a bake sale proposal. They were not expecting Dr. Eris Vance. I didn't talk about feelings. I talked about science. I shared my screen and presented a detailed proposal, complete with cellular models and patient outcome projections. The current standard of care for this condition is palliative, not restorative, I stated, my voice firm and confident. However, as my research demonstrates, early-stage intervention with targeted neuroregenerative therapies can not only delay progression by up to 30%, but can actively improve patient quality of life. I clicked to my final slide. It was a stunning architectural rendering of a new building annex. My endowment proposal isn't charity, I said, looking each board member in the eye. It's a strategic investment in a new, higher standard of care for this community. We will call it the Eleanor Vance Wing for Neuroregenerative Medicine. I had used their language. I had used my science. I had turned my greatest passion into my greatest weapon. Phase 3 was preservation. This was the most important step building the escape hatch. While Lila was buying designer dresses for the party, I was closing on a house, online, through a series of secure transactions. I purchased a beautiful, modest, single-story home in a quiet neighborhood just 10 minutes from the hospital. It wasn't a mansion to show off. It was a sanctuary, designed for my mother's needs. The landscaping discreetly hid wheelchair ramps. The master bathroom was a fully accessible wet room. One of the bedrooms had a view of a small, tranquil garden, perfect for a home-based therapy space. It was the physical manifestation of my care, thoughtful, practical, and built to last. It was our future, a life completely free from Lila's financial strings and emotional blackmail. So, as I stood there on the lawn, enduring my sister's triumphant gaze, I wasn't broken and empty-handed. I had a digital record of her cruelty, a powerful new alliance with the city's most respected medical institution, and the keys to a new life waiting for us. She thought she had me cornered. In reality, she had just walked straight into a trap that I had so carefully and quietly built. So tell me, if you were in my shoes and had to prepare for a reckoning, where would you start? 1. Gathering the evidence. 2. Finding powerful allies. Or 3. Securing your own financial escape plan. The silence that followed my sister's insult was different from the one that had followed her toast. The first had been filled with polite admiration for her. This one was thick with discomfort. It was a tangible thing, heavy and suffocating. Guests shifted their weight, suddenly finding their shoes fascinating. A few people exchanged nervous glances. Lila stood with her arms crossed, a smug, triumphant smirk on her face, waiting for the tears, the outburst, the final, satisfying crumble she had been engineering all evening. She was basking in what she believed was her ultimate victory. I did not give it to her. Instead of turning away, I took a slow, deliberate breath. The cold focus I'd felt earlier now solidified into something hard and unbreakable in my chest. I gave her a small, empty smile before turning my back on her completely. I walked with a purpose I hadn't felt all night, moving toward the large white screen and projector Lila had set up to loop a slideshow of glossy, curated family photos most featuring her. I unplugged her laptop and connected my own. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. I could feel Lila's glare on my back, could sense her irritation that I was stealing her spotlight. I picked up the wireless microphone from the small lectern. My hand was perfectly steady. I tapped it once, and the soft sound cut through the awkward whispers. If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment, I said, my voice even and clear, resonating with a calm authority no one in that yard had ever heard from me before. I turned to face the guests, my eyes briefly landing on Lila, whose face was now a mask of confusion and fury. "I'd like to thank my sister." "Lila," I began, letting the words hang in the air. "Thank you for that introduction. And thank you for bringing everyone we care about together today. It actually provides the perfect audience for the real gift I have for our mother." With a click of the mouse, the screen behind me flickered to life. It was not a family photo. It was a stunningly detailed 3D architectural rendering of a sleek, modern glass and steel building. Light poured through massive windows into serene patient rooms and state-of-the-art laboratories. It was beautiful, hopeful, and utterly baffling to everyone watching. At the bottom of the image, in clean, elegant script, were the words, "The Eleanor Vance Wing for Neuroregenerative Medicine." A collective gasp went through the crowd. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated shock. People leaned forward in their seats, squinting at the screen. What was this? A fantasy A-joke? Lila stared, her mouth slightly agape, the smirk finally gone, replaced by a look of complete bewilderment. "For the past 2 years," I continued, my voice gaining strength as I spoke, "while I have been home caring for our mother, I have also been continuing my life's work. My research has been focused on developing new therapies to promote neural repair in patients with degenerative conditions. I was no longer the quiet caregiver, the family burden. I was Dr. Eris Vance, and this was my lecture. I've always believed that the best way to honor someone is not just to manage their pain, but to fight for their future, and the future of everyone who suffers as they do." I clicked to the next slide. It was a high-resolution scan of a formal letter, printed on heavy cream letterhead, embossed with the official seal of North Charlotte General Hospital. I gave them a moment to read the first few lines. It was a letter from the board of directors, formally accepting a historic, multi-million-dollar endowment from an anonymous donor to fund the construction and operation of the new wing. The letter overflowed with words like transformative, visionary, and unprecedented generosity. Then, I delivered the final piece of information. The hospital was kind enough to respect my wishes for anonymity during the planning phases, I said, my gaze sweeping across the stunned faces until it landed, with surgical precision, on my sister. But today, in honor of my mother, I'm happy to claim that work as my own. The silence that followed was a thunderclap. It was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, our uncle, a man who had only ever asked me about my hobbies, found his voice. "Eris, this is incredible," he stammered. "But how could you possibly?" It was the question Lila was desperately trying to process, her mind visibly reeling as she tried to make sense of a reality that did not compute. I finally turned to look at her fully, my expression not triumphant, but clinical, as if observing a failed experiment. Lila has spent years reminding me and everyone else that my work didn't pay the bills, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. She was right. It did something far more important. It resulted in a series of foundational patents for a new class of synthetic proteins capable of stimulating neural growth. Patents which, I am happy to say, were recently acquired by a Swiss pharmaceutical consortium in a private deal. I let that sink in. The proceeds from that single acquisition are significant. More than enough to ensure Mom receives the best care in the world in a facility that bears her name, and more than enough to ensure that I will never again be dependent on anyone's transactional generosity. The color drained from Lila's face. the carefully constructed universe where she was the powerful, wealthy benefactor and I was the pathetic, needy dependent, had just been annihilated by a nuclear blast. Her power, her narrative, her very identity in this family, it was all gone, turned to ash in a matter of seconds. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. But before she could even try to recover, another voice cut through the stunned silence. A man's voice, sharp with a dawning horror and disgust. It was her fiancé, Dr. Thomas. He stood up slowly, his eyes locked on the screen, then on me. As a physician, he understood the medical and philanthropic magnitude of my gift in a way no one else there could. The look he gave me was one of profound, earth-shattering respect. Then, he turned that look on Lila, and his face hardened into a mask of cold fury. "All this time," he said, his voice dangerously quiet but carrying across the lawn. "For our entire relationship, Lila, I have listened to you talk about your sister. You painted a picture of someone who was struggling, aimless, a burden you had to graciously bear." He took a step toward her, his fists clenched at his sides. "You told me she was wasting her potential." He gestured, his hand shaking with anger, toward the screen. "That," he said, his voice rising, "is not the work of a burden. That is the work of a genius. That is the work of a quiet, brilliant, profoundly dedicated woman who was sacrificing her own life to care for her mother while simultaneously changing the future of medicine. And you stood here, in front of everyone, and you called her a parasite. The word, his word, hung in the air, now an indictment." He walked to the small table where Lila had left her purse. He pulled the stunning 3-carat diamond engagement ring from his finger. He didn't throw it. He placed it deliberately on the table, the sound echoing in the silence. "I'm a doctor," he said, his voice now filled with a deep, sorrowful resolve. "I took an oath to do no harm. I cannot, and I will not, bind my life and my integrity to someone with a character so fundamentally cruel, so devoid of grace, so completely unable to recognize true worth." He looked at me one last time, his eyes filled with an apology that was more than words. "I am so sorry, Eris. Forgive me for not seeing the truth sooner." He turned to Lila, who was now visibly trembling, her face a mess of shock and humiliation. "We are done," he said. Then he turned, and without a single look back, he walked out of the yard, out of the party, and out of her life. The crowd was a sea of stone-faced statues. No one looked at me with pity anymore. They looked at me with awe, and they looked at Lila, standing utterly alone in the wreckage of her own making, with a unified, unspoken judgment. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at my mother, who had pushed herself up from her chair and was looking at me, her face wet with tears. But they weren't tears of sadness or pain. They were tears of pure, unadulterated pride. He party ended not with a bang, but with a slow, agonizing fizzle. The guests, caught in the crossfire of a family war they never signed up for, evaporated into the twilight. They offered hurried, awkward goodbyes, their eyes darting between me, my sister, and the empty space where Dr. Thomas had stood. They left behind a scene of devastation that had nothing to do with the string quartet or the half-eaten canapes. The manicured lawn had become a graveyard of my sister's social standing. The scent of gardenias was now mingled with the acrid smell of humiliation. I stood by my mother, her frail hand clutching mine, her strength a surprising anchor in the swirling emotional storm. We watched as Lila, who had seemed 10 feet tall just an hour before, seemed to physically shrink. The proud, regal posture was gone, replaced by a defeated slump. Her silk dress, once a symbol of her effortless wealth, now looked like a costume for a part she could no longer play. She stood alone amidst the wreckage, a queen deposed in her own court. After the last car pulled away, she finally moved. She approached us slowly, her expensive heels sinking slightly into the soft grass, each step hesitant and unsteady. Her face was pale, her makeup smudged where she had frantically wiped away tears. When she reached us, she didn't look at me. She looked only at our mother. "Mom," she whispered, her voice raw and broken. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. I was trying to do something nice." My mother sighed, a sound heavy with years of unspoken sadness. "Oh, Lila," she said softly. "You have a good heart. I know you do. But your pride is a fortress, and I think you've been trapped inside it for a very long time." Lila's composure finally shattered. A choked sob escaped her lips. She turned to me, her eyes pleading, desperate. "Eris, please," she begged, and the sound of that word from her felt alien and wrong. I didn't mean it. You have to know I didn't mean it. It was a stupid, horrible thing to say. I was stressed about the party, and I took it out on you. Can't we just go back? I looked at my sister, truly looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see a monster. I saw a deeply insecure woman whose only tool for measuring worth was a bank statement. I saw someone so terrified of being seen as anything less than perfect that she had to diminish everyone around her to feel tall. I felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the cold, hard memory of years of quiet cuts, of being made to feel small and worthless in my own home. "Go back to what?" "Lila," I asked, my voice devoid of anger. It was calm, clinical, final. "Go back to you writing checks and me being the family charity case. Go back to you getting applause for your generosity while you mock my life's work. There's nothing to go back to. That entire world was a fiction you created. It's gone now." Her face crumpled. "But I'm your sister," she cried, as if that title alone could erase everything. "Yes," I said. "You are, and that is the only reason I am still standing here talking to you." I gently squeezed my mother's hand and led her back toward the house, leaving Lila to drown in the silence of her own making. The next morning, the confrontation I knew was coming finally arrived. I was in the kitchen, packing a box of my mother's favorite teacups, when Lila walked in. She had changed into simple clothes, her face scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked younger, more vulnerable. It was a strategic choice. "We need to talk," she said quietly. I didn't stop packing. "I have nothing more to say." "Well, I do," she snapped, a flash of the old Lila returning. "You humiliated me, Eris, in front of everyone. You destroyed my engagement. You took my entire life and you blew it up for sport." I carefully wrapped a teacup in newspaper and placed it in the box. I turned to face her, leaning back against the counter. "Let's be very clear about something," I said, my voice low and even. "I didn't do any of that. Your own actions did. I didn't call myself a parasite. You did. I didn't tell Thomas for years that your sister was a worthless burden. You did. I didn't build a life based on a false narrative of your own superiority. You did. All I did, Lila, was finally turn on the lights. If you were terrified of what everyone saw in the brightness, that's because you chose to live in the dark. My mother entered the kitchen then, moving slowly but with a new determination in her eyes. She put a gentle hand on Lila's arm. "Your sister is right," she said softly, but with a spine of steel I hadn't seen in years. "I love you more than words can say, but I have stood by silently and watched you chip away at Eris's spirit for too long. I let it happen. I was weak, and I was afraid of the conflict. But last night I saw my daughter claim her power, and it gave me back some of my own. The scorekeeping, the condescension. It has to end. This family cannot survive it." Lila looked from our mother to me, trapped. The two people she thought she controlled were now a unified front. Tears welled in her eyes again. This time, a mix of grief and genuine confusion. "So what now?" she whispered. "Do you just hate me? Am I not your sister anymore?" This was it. The moment the boundary had to be drawn, not in the sand, but in concrete. I walked toward her, closing the space between us. "I will never hate you. Lila, you are part of me. That will never change," I said, and I meant it. But the dynamic we had is over. It is dead and buried. From this day forward, our relationship, if we are to have one at all, will be built on a foundation of mutual respect, not financial transactions, not public performances, real, honest respect. I held her gaze, making sure she understood the weight of my next words. "I will always be here for you as a sister, but I will not be your emotional punching bag. I will not be the person you diminish to make yourself feel powerful. I will not participate in any conversation that involves a scorecard of who has given more. My life, my choices, and my work are no longer up for your review or commentary." I paused, letting the new terms and conditions sink in. I am moving Mom to a new house today, a place I have prepared for her, where she can be safe, comfortable, and cared for without being a pawn in anyone's power games. You are welcome to visit her, but the price of admission into our lives is simple kindness. If you can't provide that, then you cannot be in our lives. The choice, for the first time, is entirely yours. The move itself was a quiet, cathartic affair. There were no arguments, no drama, just the simple, rhythmic work of carrying boxes from a place of confinement to a place of freedom. When my mother rolled her wheelchair up the smooth, custom-built ramp to the front door of her new home, she paused at the threshold. She looked at the sun-drenched living room, the accessible kitchen, the wide doorways. She looked at the garden I had designed for her, visible through the large picture window. She turned to me, her eyes shimmering with tears. "You did this," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "All this time, you were building a sanctuary for me. I was building it for us." I corrected her gently. That evening, after Mom was comfortably settled in her new room, I sat alone in the quiet living room. The house was filled with the smell of fresh paint and the promise of a new beginning. My laptop sat on the coffee table, no longer a secret weapon, but simply a tool. An email notification popped up on the screen. The subject line read, "Keynote Invitation International Symposium on Cellular Regeneration, Geneva." I opened it. It was a formal invitation to be the opening speaker at one of the most prestigious scientific conferences in the world, an honor reserved for the titans of my field. They wanted me to present my research, the very work Lila had dismissed as a cute little hobby, the work that had saved us. A slow, genuine smile spread across my face. It wasn't a smile of victory over my sister. It was a smile of recognition for myself. My two worlds, the devoted daughter and the dedicated scientist, were no longer at war. They had finally, peacefully, become one. Sitting here now, in the quiet of a home built not just with money, but with resolve. I've had time to reflect. I look out at the garden where my mother now spends her afternoons, and I realize that my story isn't just about a dramatic family party. It's a blueprint. It's a case study in how to reclaim your own narrative when someone else is trying to write it for you, and I promised you a way to turn hurt into power. So here it is. I've distilled my entire journey down to 3 fundamental lessons. First, you must recognize the story that is being told about you. For years, Lila's story was that she was the capable provider, and I was the dependent burden. It was simple. It was convincing. And because I was silent, I was complicit. The first step to freedom is to see the cage you're in and to call it by its name. My cage was a story, and the word parasite was its key. Second, your unique skills are your most powerful weapons. Lila's power was money, a tool that is loud, obvious, and ultimately superficial. My power was my mind, my patience, my ability to see patterns and to plan a long game. She thought my science was a useless hobby, but that hobby taught me how to research, how to strategize, how to negotiate with a hospital board, and ultimately, how to fund my own liberation. Your power might be your creativity, your empathy, your organizational skills. Whatever it is, find it and sharpen it. It is the one tool no one can ever take from you. And third, and this is the most important part, freedom requires an exit plan. Hope is not a strategy. Waiting for a toxic person to change is not a strategy. A strategy is the secret bank account. It's the new skill you learn online at night. It's the network of supportive friends you build outside of the toxic system. It's the new apartment you scouted out, just in case. It's the quiet, deliberate work you do in the shadows to prepare for the day you decide to step into the light. If you feel trapped right now, here is the 90-second framework. It's the method I used. Record, leverage, preserve. First, record. Document everything. The texts, the emails, the backhanded compliments. This isn't about pettiness. It's about data. The truth isn't in one single event. It's in the pattern. Second, leverage. Identify your unique, portable power. The skill that is entirely yours. Start using it to build something for yourself. An alliance, a project, a reputation, completely independent of the person or system that is holding you down. And third, preserve. Build your escape hatch. Financially, emotionally, physically. Create a safe place for you to land before you ever need it. My story, I know, was resolved with a resource that is incredibly rare. My patent gave me financial power, and that's a form of justice not everyone has access to. Which brings me to the one question I find myself asking over and over. What about Dr. Thomas? His intervention was a critical turning point. But was it truly just a sudden moment of moral clarity? Or, in his time with my sister, had he seen other things? Small moments of cruelty that he ignored. Red flags he brushed aside. What was the final straw for him? The story of justice isn't complete without understanding the role of the righteous bystander. The next time we talk, we're going to find out. Because he reached out to me. He told me there was more to the story. And I'm going to share what he told me from his perspective. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what he had to say. It changes everything.